What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Canes Insight Daily Podcast, powered by Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. It's been a couple days of mourning. The music's gotten a little more depressing. I had Radiohead on my stereo. I haven't listened to Radiohead in probably like 20 years, but I guess I was in that depressed mood. It's been tough, man. And the recruiting class, having some bumps here, but all hope is not lost. You know, there's still a lot to talk about and to focus on getting this team to a consistent place where we're consistently relevant like we've been this year, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Deflating loss on Saturday, and the recruiting class not trending in the direction you want it to go in. To folks that are always trending in the right direction, Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you or someone you care about has been injured in an accident, you could be entitled to significant compensation. Dial 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Take back control of your life with Anajar and Levine. Pete, hop in.
What's up, D? How you doing?
Like I said, it's not the most fun time to do this. We've had a lot of fun shows. It was fun today, but we've had a lot of things to be gloating about and celebrating on these Mondays. This one's not one of those. Real quick, a lot of people are asking for recruiting news, and I will say this. In terms of like the last couple days, there's been a zero dark 30 kind of approach from the school following the Syracuse game on recruiting. The timing of this is so unique. The turnaround so quick. So many things moving around, which is why you've not seen me put out an episode of The Bank. You've not seen, 247, who's very plugged in, put anything out from the school. It's just that this has been kind of a lockdown time. What I'm saying is I'm digging, and I'm pretty confident we'll get you a detailed bank with all the information before the signing day, and we'll give it to you here free on the Canes Insight Daily Podcast. But there's a lot that's public that we can talk about, specifically Gavin Nix, linebacker commit guy I really like from IMG, crystal ball to Oregon, number one team in the country. Would be an enormous loss for a team that needs a smart linebacker that plays sideline to sideline like Gavin Nix. Also Hilton Stubbs, Drake Stubbs, safety from Jacksonville Mandarin, crystal ball to Florida. They have his quarterback committed to Florida, teammate Jamie French, also trending potentially to Florida, Jacksonville kid. That was one that when Florida started picking up momentum became harder to hold on to. Two critical positions for where Miami is struggling right now would be two huge losses. And I've seen nothing, before those crystal balls went through, I'd heard that those were trending away. So it wasn't a huge surprise. Again, I will have more detailed information on the absolute latest when I drop the bank, but I was not surprised to see those two go that way, at least from a crystal ball standpoint. They haven't announced anything official, but I'd heard that Stubbs was sort of trending away, and then Nix we'd have to battle for Oregon on. Now, I understand we're still battling on Nix, but you're competing with the number one team in the country, and your defense hasn't played that well. And then big picture, there's finances involved here, and Miami continues to be extremely competitive with their NIL collective, canesconnection.com/CIS if you want to be part of this battle with us. Again, canesconnection.com/CIS. You want to sign up for Miami's official NIL collective. The link is in the bio. But, no one has infinite money, not even Oregon or Texas or schools like that. So at some point, you kind of got to make decisions. And I don't think that these two are financial deals like that. But what I'm saying is money is part of all of these. So if you lose two kids that you want to keep because they want to go elsewhere, that money can be reallocated, which could help you with other targets. So that's something to keep in mind as we get down the stretch, and also jump into the portal. The portal is hot and heavy. You've seen a ton of names jump in. You saw Miller Moss jump in from USC, quarterback. You've seen Travion Barnes from FIU, all-conference linebacker. Bunch of other names. The wide receiver from FIU, from Chattanooga, Tennessee. I believe his name is Eric Rivers, one of the top receivers statistically in the country. And that's just a few of the names that you've seen jump in lately. So Miami is going to have an opportunity to make a big splash in the portal. Of course, they want to land some good players here on Wednesday. But we knew it would be chaos. We talked about it, that there'd be a lot of action here because of the timing of the season, portal, and recruiting class. Unfortunately, the the vibes are not where you want them to be because you lost that game against Syracuse heading into this stretch. But there's a lot moving around, a lot of movement, a lot of working, and we will give you the absolute latest. But that's the news that's been public, and of course, it is not good news. Pete, I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, you kind of alluded to it, but it sounded like regardless of if Miami won that game against Syracuse or not, that these were trending opposite direction of where you wanted them to be if you're Miami, correct? In terms of the guys that we think might flip here.
Yeah. I think there's a Dallas Wilson still in play. There's a DJ Pickett still in play. Ben Hanks still in play. And, when you lose money somewhere else, it can go other places. But then you also have to think of what's really going to help this team go to that next level
next year. And
could it be the portal? And that's, people are going to say, oh, you're just saying that because you're losing in recruiting. And the truth is, look, Miami wanted to have a top 5 class. Miami didn't say, hey, we're going to punt on this class and save all our money for the portal. That's not the realistic or true story of what's happening here. But when you have so many things going on, there's different ways to improve your team. I think from a Miami standpoint, you're trying to zero in and land, you keep your class together as much as you can, then land potentially a true impact player who can make a difference, not just a guy. I think the days of recruiting a whole team in high school, that's not as much of a thing as it is landing the true difference makers, getting 4 real impact NFL type guys who help you win ball games. And then the portal can kind of help you fill in some holes as they come up. But you really got to land impact guys. I think this class has some good players, needs more impact. So hopefully you can land an impact guy, a Dallas Wilson, a Ben Hanks, a DJ Pickett here as we get down the home stretch and keep as much of the class together as you can.
Something that's making things kind of tricky as well, because we're getting a lot of comments about the defensive coaches and staff changes and stuff, is that, yes, and you've said it, expect there to be changes on the defensive side of the ball there. But on the off chance that Miami sneaks into the playoffs here, right? If things go their way and they get in as, the 12th or 11th or 12th seed, then you're not going to fire the defensive staff right now and shake things up before you know, because Miami could somehow be given a second chance at things there, and then you kind of just have to work with what you've got right at that point. So I think that's a tricky part of the equation here as well.
No question. By the way, DZ Din is saying, gotta love when the goalposts move. I don't think the goalposts have moved. This team, this coaching staff, everybody, the goal was a top 5 class, certainly a top 10 class. And if you're looking at potentially landing outside the top 10, that's not good. The goal was to win the ACC championship and get that 3rd seed to the playoffs. So when you lose a game to Syracuse and you don't make the playoffs, or don't make the ACC championship game, very likely don't make the playoffs, that's not good. So I'm not trying to move those goalposts. I'm saying this is where we're at. I'm trying to give it to you as realistic as possible. I'll have more detail when I get a more recent update, although I can tell you that I have no reason to doubt those crystal balls from Gavin Nix and Drake Stubbs. But when things like that happen, you got to adjust. And the goal is still, in my view, to have a sustainable team that is relevant every year. So the question becomes, how can you make sure when you lose a player like Cam Ward, who's one of the best, if not the best players in the country, how can you make sure that this next year's team is a relevant team and you don't take a huge step back after taking a pretty significant step forward? And that's what we're going to be talking about all off season, even as we get here to the bowl game. But a couple things about the playoff, Pete, I hate to even talk about this because I'm not confident that SMU is going to beat Clemson. I could be wrong on that. I hope I am. But if SMU does beat Clemson, Miami does have a realistic path to an at-large berth. You compare their resume to Alabama. Alabama's losses are significantly worse than Miami. When you really look at that Oklahoma loss, which is probably the worst loss that any of those teams took, given the margin and the struggles that Oklahoma's had, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. Alabama has 3 losses. Even though Miami has not played those top 10 type teams, Miami has played quite a bit of bowl teams. It's been mentioned on Twitter quite a bit that Miami played 6 bowl teams on the road. Those are hard games. Even if the team might be on the border of the top 25, those are tough games that teams lose. You've seen teams lose those games all year, but Miami is 4-2 in those games against bowl teams. Alabama 1-3 road games against bowl teams. You talk about 9-3 Duke win, 8-4 Louisville, 7-5 Florida, which was on the road and is playing very, very good ball. One of only 13 Power 4 teams with 2 losses or fewer, 7 wins versus the Power 4. So when you look at some of the stats here, you can make a pretty clear argument that Miami goes in over Bama. Miami, when you look at Alabama's losses to unranked teams, they got 2. Miami's got 2. South Carolina, 3 losses, home loss to an unranked LSU team. So again, everybody's losing these games to unranked teams. It's unfortunate that Miami's lost 2. It's quite frankly, it's a devastating blow that Miami's lost 2. And I think that's why they're most likely not going to make the playoffs. And I can't sit here and bang the table and say they deserve to make it, because they had their opportunity to make it and they didn't come through. But when you look at the stats, it's very easily defensible to say that if SMU beats Clemson, Miami on paper can make a pretty statistically sound case that it deserves that last spot.
And we understand that the committee does take into account the players that are out there. And that was one of the reasons Florida State, with their circumstances last year, didn't get into the 4 there. But I think Cam Ward has also become like a sympathetic figure in I would say the committee's eyes, because you look at how Miami's lost these games. Obviously, the Georgia Tech game, a lot of different things went on there. But this last game and how Miami just is able to put up all these points, and the numbers are what they are on the offensive side of the ball, that maybe the committee says, man, they have Cam Ward. That offense can go toe-to-toe with anybody. Compare that to just the eye test, sort of, when you look at how they lost that last game against Oklahoma, for example, and they lost to a Vanderbilt team that, showed improvement this year. But you saw how Georgia Tech went toe-to-toe with Georgia. So I think that also helps, the case somewhat as well. But again, I'm kind of with you, D. I'm not expecting it.
And that means we go right into talent acquisition season. Really, you're going to talent acquisition season anyways, whether you're in the playoff or not. But it becomes certainly more of a focus. And I think big picture with Miami, the goal, and again, I don't want to be accused of moving the goalposts. I think I'm saying pretty clear. You don't land a top 10 class, that's a disappointment. This loss to Syracuse is an incredible disappointment. So I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But if that's what's happening, what's the best way to get to Miami to a place where they can compete for an ACC championship next year and keep this relevance going, which Miami's not been able to do. Miami's not even been able to get to this point where they're at, but certainly maintaining the relevance. They didn't do it in 2018. And quite frankly, after Golden and Shannon's best seasons and Manny's best season with Derek King, things went totally off the rails. So how do you keep this thing relevant and steady? And I think, to me, the goal needs to be impact guys, not volume of good players where you're saying every position's got some good experienced guys there. I think you need to trust your recruiting in that 23 and 24 class. A lot of those guys didn't play that much because you were playing veterans, hoping to win the ACC championship with Cam Ward, maybe trusting the veterans a little too much as opposed to developing some of the younger players that you spent a lot of resources to acquire. So I think going forward, especially if you're not going to get a top 5 class here with a ton of guys that are ready to play right away, is targeted impact guys, quality over quantity. For the quantity, you've got to rely on some of these 23 and 24 guys to develop. It's a leap of faith with some of them, but that's why you recruited them. That's why you paid them a lot of money, is because you believed in their talent. You just got to let them rip and see how it goes. The defense is already struggling. So to see guys like Armando Blunt, Justin Scott, a Dylan Day,
Booker
Pickett, certainly. Those are the kind of guys, Cole McConaughey, Bobby Pruitt, even a Marquise Lightfoot. You got to see those guys play and and you got to kind of take the good with the bad. You're already bad on defense. You don't need to have veterans at every single position just to fill spots. Now, go ahead, Pete.
No, yeah, well, it's felt like not at times this year. It felt like pretty much all year long when there were struggles defensively, they just, instead of just throwing the young guy who probably is more capable from an athletic and physical standpoint, throwing them out there and letting them learn on the fly, the fallback was, let's just play the veteran because they played more football, which in certain situations I understand. But when it was over and over and over again, some of the issues that showed themselves, you would have liked to see the young guys rotate in there enough that you're at this point of the season, you say, you know what, these guys are getting toasted as it is. This guy's played enough football now. He's young, but he's played enough football that we can throw him out there in a game that has this much on the line. And they still didn't have that trust in some of these guys.
Yeah, I think the pressure of having Cam Ward and wanting to make sure that his one season goes the way you want it to go, I think played into some of that. But I think you really do need to see what these 23 and 24 classes are about. You can't just keep papering it over with the portal. Now, the portal is a huge thing. So what I'm saying is, especially if you do have losses here in this class and money you don't spend that you thought you were going to spend on a Gavin Nix or a Stubbs. Go ahead, Pete.
D Breeze has a comment here. Says, hey guys, I don't mind the portal, but I think getting one and done guys across the board is short-sighted. Thoughts? I mean, you've mentioned it before. Look, there will be one and done guys. That's the nature of the portal. But I think you have said the focus probably will be on guys who have multiple years of eligibility, kind of patching up perceived misses in certain classes along the way.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. And those guys are out there. Also, I think we just need to get impact guys. And I keep saying that, and people are like, oh yeah, it's obvious, get impact guys. But what I mean is, instead of getting an extra defensive lineman that's going to cost you a significant amount of money, trust a young guy in that spot and then spend more for the best safety you can find. A guy that's a leader, a guy that can run, a guy that can hit, a guy that's smart, a guy that's going to set the tone for your defense. Same at linebacker. Back 7 impact guys. Say 3 of them. If you get 3 true impact guys in the back 7, and when I say impact, I'm talking about, obviously like a Caleb Downs, right? But even just like a guy like a Jaquan Johnson, that caliber of guy, a guy like a Shaq, just to use Miami examples, a guy like a Corn Elder, guys that they don't have to be superstars, but guys that are impactful, that you feel their presence on the field, that can run, that can hit, that are smart, and that are going to give your defense a bit of a personality and a culture, which I think is missing. If you were to define this defense, sometimes there's defenses that are really physical that maybe lack some finesse. There's some defenses that are super athletic, but not that physical. I mean, we're just kind of there. There's no real identity to this defense. So I think rather than trying to fill every hole, trust your young guys to fill some of those spots and then add impact guys. Obviously, there's a lot of questions. We talked about this on the post-game show about Coach Guidry and whether he's going to be part of this going forward and the defensive staff. In general, I think you're going to see significant defensive changes. Who that is, we'll see. But that's just a reality of how these things work. And based on just what I expect, I do expect to see significant defensive changes. And that could make a big difference. You saw it in 2016, how quickly that turned. But you really need a culture change, in my view, on that defensive side of the ball. And look, some of that goes right to the top. Some of that goes to the defensive coaches. They own it, right? They're the coaches. They get paid a lot for it to look a certain way. But I think in terms of if you're trying to strategize how to get to that, the culture on defense that you want, I think you need tip of the spear type players, particularly in the back 7, that play the way you want to play and bring that energy and that mentality that permeates some of the younger players that you spend a lot of money and beat a lot of good schools to get.
Just reading a lot of these comments, D, and appreciate we have over 1,000 live viewers right now. So remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you're watching on Twitter, we are on YouTube at Official Canes Insight, and we go daily Monday through Friday. So obviously it's like the Lion's Den, these live shows right now with the comments. It's the negativity obviously look, the momentum has been halted. There's no doubt about that. It was a great few months here in terms of momentum, but this last week just completely puts a halt to it. And again, maybe some things fall your way here in terms of the playoff and sneaking in late, but that would be a complete revival job right there. And at the end of the day, the signing day would have already passed. So,
and Pete, throw these comments at me too, or questions, because I got maybe all the negativity in Canes football, which, look, I'm not going to push back on it. I'm feeling it too. I was in the press as anybody.
We're getting a couple comments.
It's overheating my computer, so I can't see
about cash issues potentially. Someone says, "Hey guys, Gabby on the other side mentioned something about cash issues. Any word?"
But I mean, look, I don't think we're going to be overpaying. Like maybe we did. Like, one of the reasons why we're able to overperform our record was, we were really ahead of the game in NIL. I think things are getting more even. But I don't think it's a situation where Miami's not in the game. It's just, it's like the NFL. You don't have unlimited money to spend. That doesn't mean you don't have money to spend. And that doesn't mean you can't acquire guys that are impactful guys that you need.
You got to be smart with it.
You got to be smart. And there's a lot of money already committed. So get some more out of the guys that are already getting paid is what I'm trying to really emphasize. And by the way, some of these folks are listening for recruiting update. Like I said, they've been zero dark 40, but what we do know is the targets remain just going up and down the line. Jarquez Carter from Newberry, DJ Pickett from Riverview, the 5-star defensive back, Ben Hanks, defensive back. Vernell Brown, I think that ship has probably sailed. But you're looking at TJ Alford from Ohio State, from Treasure Coast, committed to Ohio State from Vero Beach. He's a linebacker you really like to add. Kellen Wiley's still in the mix there, particularly if Gavin Nix is trending away. Your commit there. So these are just some of the guys that you're really fighting for and hoping to flip a couple, because they could make a big impact if you were to flip a couple of these guys. You also got to play defense. I know one name that Florida's hot after is Josh Moore. He's probably been the best of all these receivers as a senior. So he's going to get a lot of attention from Florida where he was once committed. You got to fight those off. So it's signing day. You're fighting for everybody. That's the same. Same was true when we got the top 5 class last year. Same was true when we got the top 7 class the year before. You're playing defense and you're playing offense at the same time. A lot of the battles that you win on defense, you don't even hear about. You just see the guy sign and not realizing all the sweat and the heartburn that went into that signature. So got to play defense, playing offense on those names that have been the same names that we've been talking about on the Canes Inside podcast for weeks now. But I think, to me, land a big name that's going to help you next year and make an impact or two, and then go in the portal and try to do the same. Hone in on specific targets. Don't just expect to get a ton of veterans and change your culture. It's not, you got to trust your young guys at some point, but they also need leadership and impactful players who set the tone for everybody. That's sort of how I'm viewing this portal season. A lot of questions about the quarterback. Obviously that's going to be big. I think the best one I've seen that's likely to enter the portal is John Mateer. Washington State finished the season with 3 straight losses. I got to think he's going to jump in. Quarterback for Washington State, extremely talented dual threat guy. He's someone that can legitimately run for 1,000 yards, throw for 3,500 yards at the Power 4 level. Kind of reminds me of Jalen Hurts, real strong lower body, dual threat guy, smart passer, but also can run up the middle and is quick. That'd be my target. I know there's ties to Oklahoma, rumors that his offensive coordinator's headed there with him. Those rumors are all over the place. I think Miami's the best fit for him by far. You saw Cam Ward go from 4th-round pick, 5th-round pick to 1st-round pick. That was the guy he replaced at Washington State. That fit makes sense. You saw Miller Moss actually enter the portal, so that's a realistic target as far as someone who's already in there. Smart guy. I think you put him behind this offensive line. I think you'd be a better team than you were, for example, with TVD in 2023. Where you had a lot of pieces in place, but you threw too many picks. You weren't smart enough at the quarterback position. I think a guy like Miller Moss could have a much better team than that team with this Miami supporting cast just because of his decision-making. But he's not mobile, so do you want someone who's more of a playmaker? Those are the considerations that will need to take place at that quarterback position. But there's going to be a lot of names jumping in, which reminds me, Pete, pull up the transfer portal board here on CanesInsight.com. So Canes Insight, 7 million posts and counting, the biggest community of Canes fans on the planet. Free message board, goes insane around this time. And we also have the transfer portal board, which is a newer thing. It's probably our hottest board, even with recruiting going, even with football going. There's every time someone jumps in the portal or gets rumored to the portal, it pops up on the transfer portal board. A lot of action there. You're going to hear about anything with the portal first. You can just stick to it all day. And it's like it's addictive. It's like the lottery, man. You've seen those names, boom, jump in. They immediately appear on the transfer portal board, and everybody's got their theories and their opinions on who we should go after. So sign up for the CanesInsight.com message boards. It's all free. 7 million posts and counting. Join the conversation. But the portal board is hot and heavy. Also talking recruiting, also talking football. You see the activity there. If it's bold green, that means it's new. So as you can see, this has been a ton of action on this board. Not to mention football and recruiting. So, Pete, any thoughts now that you've had some time to sit on the loss from Saturday?
I mean, just going back quickly to what you were talking about in terms of the portal, like, for example, you look at D tackle. Yes, would love to go get a big time stud, 6'4", 6'5", 315 plus, but I'd rather see and go develop a Justin Scott and Artavis Jones. Like, let those guys play, but don't just go grab a couple guys just to eat some snaps up when these guys have now been in the system for a year. We know they've got the athletic ability. We know they've got the size. Like, trust them to go out there and do it. Again, yes, if a difference maker, if an impact guy, Simeon Barrett was awesome this year. I would take that 10 times out of 10. But I want them to be smart about certain guys, and then trusting that you look at the development of certain guys on this roster and say there's a lot of talent kind of underneath the layers here that if they stick with it can be impact players down the line.
Yeah, a lot of people. I see a lot of comments about the money still. People like, oh, UF, why are they getting guys with a losing record? I mean, guys, we had a losing record the 2 years before and took UF and Napier to the woodshed repeatedly. So, same players. I think what's happening here is they have momentum from Lagway. They were going to buy out Napier for being under 500 after 3 years, but they're using that money to pay players. We talked about in the bank, several weeks ago that this was going to happen and was happening. So that's not a surprise. This is their card to play. They've been very bad on the field. Again, Napier 3 years in is under 500. Their recruiting has been pretty bad as well. They've lost to Miami pretty much every single recruiting battle. So now they got some momentum with Lagway, and they got money to spend that they didn't have to spend buying out their coach, and that they didn't spend on players that they lost in the prior recruiting battle. So they're playing their card. They're putting their chips in with Lagway. Makes sense to me. It's going to hurt Miami to a degree because you're competing against a team that's really going all in and playing their only card. So, Miami did a lot of that last year with Cam Ward as far as going all in with some veteran guys, which is why it's frustrating that she didn't get that ACC championship game appearance, is why we're all so deflated about it. But you got to play the cards. You got to see where you're at as a program and adjust accordingly. Florida, this is what they're doing. It's hurting Miami now, but don't forget that Miami beat UF repeatedly on the trail with the same players involved, same coaches involved, same boosters and everything involved. And when they played on the field with a lot of those players, Miami destroyed UF 41-17. So UF's making a move. You got to deal with it. You got to adjust. Miami will be fine. Miami's in the NIL game. Miami is not broke or anything like that. Just more people are in the game. Things are catching up, and there's going to be a lot of competition, a lot of parity. The same thing you're seeing on the field, you're seeing in recruiting. There's a lot of parity in terms of the distribution of talent. One team can't just stockpile all the good players. Those days are gone. At least they're gone. Right, they're not here right now and you're seeing it on the field. Same thing that's happening in recruiting. By the way, look, if you're concerned about the money and you want to do your part, canesconnection.com/CIS. The link is in the description. Sign up for Miami's official NIL collective. Get access to private Zooms, all the latest information that is non-public. Plus, you're helping out Miami in this fight. Appreciate everybody who is already in the fight. P, you want to talk about the it's hard to pick a player of the game for Beacon Adjusters, given what happened. But, what can you do? We got to pick one, right? Someone's got to be. They didn't all play bad. So, my Beacon Adjusters player of the game for that Syracuse game is Damian Martinez. I thought he ran extremely well. He had that long run that was called back. He was physical. He was fast. My one regret is that he didn't run the ball more. We didn't run with him more. I thought when you had Mark Fletcher and Damian Martinez in the same backfield, I was talking about this with my buddy Dean, when you had both those guys in the same backfield, it was really, really potent. Fletcher as a lead blocker is basically like a fullback. And of course, Martinez is a great runner. So I really like that dynamic. You could also pass out of that with good protection at the running back position. Sad we went away from it, but I thought Martinez played a really, really good game and had more to give in that particular matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely go with that. It's obviously the one that got called back was extremely unfortunate, and that's one that we would all like back for sure. But the O-line, I think, I'll kind of give that group a shout out because of what they were doing as a whole in the run game, and it seemed like Ward had all day to throw back there.
No question about it. There was man, it's a tough one to lose. That's what happens. Look, we did the whole thing on the post game, so we're not talking so much about the loss now. We had the depressed post game after the game, but really, when your defense is as bad as this is, your margin for error is so tight. So you could say, yeah, Restrepo's fumble, yeah, this play call, yeah, this decision to go for a field goal. But at the end of the day, when your defense is that bad, your margin of error is zero. And when your margin of error is zero, you're going to win some close games like we did against Cal, Virginia Tech, all the others. You're going to lose some. Best offense in the country, bad defense, too many penalties, one of the most penalized teams in the country. I believe we're 120th right now in penalty yardage per game nationally. Add that all up, 10-2. Best record Miami's had in a while. It's a reflection of Cam Ward and the best offense in the country. But those weaknesses are the reason you're 10-2. So you can nitpick play here and there, but ultimately this is what you get when your defense just doesn't have any kind of consistent identity or performance. You're going to have shootouts. When you have a lot of shootouts, you're going to lose some, especially when you're playing bowl teams on the road.
So again, the Beacon Adjusters player of the week.
Give them the number, Pete.
954-466-4224.
And that's if you have been affected by any storm, Hurricane Milton, Hurricane Helene, any other storm. Beacon Adjusters Group will take care of you in your time of need. They're pros. They've been handling these for years. They know exactly what to do with your claim. So again, Hurricane Milton, Hurricane Helene, any kind of storm. There was some action this season, not just this hurricane season, but the hurricane season more broadly. So call up Beacon Adjusters. Again, Pete, give that number one more time.
954-466-4224.
All right, we got any questions in there, Pete? Give it to me.
Let me see.
Or are people just fired up?
Yeah, people asking for coaches to be fired, and someone says losing Restrepo will hurt more than Cam.
That, of course, I don't agree with that, but I think Restrepo is a big loss. Here's one thing I'll say, though, on the receiver position. I think receiver is a position of it's a buyer's market when it comes to receivers in the portal. There's a lot of them. There's good ones. There's guys that have produced that just want better opportunities. So I think you'll be able to find – you're not going to find – Restrepo's a first-team All-America type player, so I don't think you're going to find a Restrepo per se. I think you're going to find an experienced player who can catch the ball, which is what you want, just someone that knows how to get open, catch it, that's confident, that's experienced, that's plug and play. Is going to be able to catch third downs and fourth downs in the ACC. But beyond that, we talked about young talent needing to play. Wide receivers first and foremost. You were blessed to have 4 NFL receivers the whole year that didn't get hurt. There's some disappointments with Jacoby George, not so much his performance on the field, but of course the penalty in this last game and some of the penalties throughout the year. Sam Brown, I don't think had the season he would have liked, but you could see his talent. He's going to go to the NFL. So to me, with those 2 spots, JoJo Trader, Nikar, top 100 players last year in the nation, there's a reason you got those guys, and it wasn't just to sit on the bench for some transfer portal guys coming in year 2. I think those 2 need to play next year and be relied upon for whoever you bring in at quarterback, along with Isaiah Horton, more of a developed, productive, proven commodity on the outside.
The Christianville, when we had the Beacon Adjusters ad going, said, "I've been affected by the Miami Hurricanes. Can they give me some money back?"
Listen, man, we've all been affected by the Hurricanes over the past 20 years, but I mean, this is going to be a season that's more fun than some of those other ones. Doesn't feel that way now because of all that buildup leads to this crush of disappointment. We'll see if it continues. Again, there's still a slim chance that the Hurricanes can make that playoff, but Yeah, we've seen this for 20 years, man. I think the key for Mario Cristobal, yes, you wanted to win big this year. We still have that slim chance of doing so. But more than that, you want to be a relevant program, and that's consistency. That means if you win 10, 11, let's say you win 11 games this year, you win that bowl, which I think is a big bowl game sneakily, especially for the stuff we're talking about with the young players, assuming you don't get to the playoff. Say you win 11 games. That'd be a huge number for the last 25 years of the Hurricanes.
Mm-hmm.
You want to follow that up with another good season. So you're just not a 1 year up and down, no stability program that you've been forever, that you have some kind of foundation, some kind of elevated floor. I think that's what you're looking for with the Hurricanes is, can you show that this program survives the loss of Cam Ward and is still a winning team? And then you continue to stack recruiting classes and do those sort of things. That's going to be the story this offseason, is replacing Cam Ward, both at quarterback and then replacing his production, because you're not going to get a Heisman candidate, most likely. Maybe you do. Maybe you get a guy like Mateer and he blows up. But you're not going to get Cam Ward. So how do you get the rest of the team elevated to make up for that loss and keep this consistency going where you're playing real games every week, no blowouts? You win most of your games. When you lose small.
We're getting questions about Shannon Dawson, D. Obviously, he's going to be a hot commodity, a top offense in the country, and, you know, he's going to have options. So, you know, he's paid well here. I'm sure would get it. He'd be in line to get a raise if he stayed here. But have you heard anything about his, you know, kind of thinking behind it? And again, from his point of view, if he does have an opportunity to be a head coach somewhere, striking while the iron is hot is not something that, you know, you would say would be a bad decision either.
Yeah, I think you'll get clarity on that sooner than later, because if Miami's in the playoff, obviously that's going to delay things. But if Miami's not in the playoff, he may want to get a jump start on whatever he's doing as a head coach. Or if he's sticking around, he's going to be very much involved with the acquisition of the portal quarterback, just as he was with Cam Ward's acquisition. So I think we'll know pretty soon. Obviously, you have the selection show coming up here this week, and then you have the SMU Clemson game. You'll know by the end of that pretty much where you stand. So I could see clarity on Dawson after that. But look, he had top 10 offense at Houston. He elevated Miami's offense almost 70 points when he came last year. And then this year, he's number one in all the major categories. So if he wants to be a head coach, and I've heard mixed stuff on that, I guess it depends on the job, this is the time to do it. You're not going to have a better resume as an offensive coordinator. So we'll see. If he does leave, I think it'll be a blow. I think the guy's done a tremendous job. But I also think there's a good job for an offensive coordinator and for a quarterback, because you know that the offensive line is going to be on point, and you know you're going to have skill position talent.
Yeah. Jalen Utsey said, do we actually think Dawson's that great, or did he just have a talented group? I mean, look, the quarterback position was obviously upgraded big time, but I think hypothetically you can expect, it's not the receivers. There's pros in that group. Elijah Arroyo could be a top 100 pick in the draft, but it's not like you have Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase first round picks, you know, on the outside there at receiver, right? So of course the quarterback situation was really, really good, but you can expect pretty much year in, year out to have solid skill positions under Mario Cristobal, and then the offensive line expect to be a strength of the team every year.
Yeah, that's the goal. You saw it at Oregon, where the offensive line was pretty consistent year over year. I think you've seen that in Miami since the first year, which was just really a transition year. You had a really good offensive line in 23 and a really good offensive line in 24. And 25, you're bringing back Malinois, you're bringing back Cooper, you're bringing back McCoy, you're bringing back Markel Bell. Ryan Rodriguez is there at center. There's some young talent that I think has the opportunity to step up and play. Plus the transfer portal, I think, is an option for an impact kind of lineman. Maybe somebody with multiple years of eligibility, someone who you think can develop into an NFL player. S.J. Alfatuli coming in, best center in the country. I could see him kind of getting on the field fast. Max Buchanan, another interior lineman that I think can get on the field fast because of where he is mentally. Other two linemen in this class, probably more long-term projects. So, yeah, it's a setup where you know you're going to get blocks and you're going to have a good running game. If you're a quarterback and if you're an offensive coordinator, if you don't have an offensive line, you don't have a running game, it's very hard to do all the fun things you want to do in the passing game. Look at Washington State with Cam Ward last year. You had Cam Ward and two really, really good receivers, two guys that, and Kelly and Williams, that are legitimate 1,000-yard college football power 4 type receivers. And with them and Cam Ward, you still had like the 53rd ranked offense in the country. You couldn't run the ball and you couldn't protect. So taking him and plugging him here, that offense goes from 53 to 1. His stock goes from 4th, 5th, 6th round pick to 1st round pick, and everybody in the country knows his name. Clear story to sell quarterbacks, clear story to sell offensive coordinators. Mario Cristobal takes a lot of the responsibility for recruiting himself, so you really don't have to recruit too much as the OC. To me, it's a great job. Hopefully Dawson stays because he's proven to be a really good fit here. But if he does move on, that's a sign of success. I think you're going to be in a much stronger position to recruit the second guy than you were the first time around.
Stephen Aveo, appreciate the contribution here. He's asking, and you kind of talked about him a little while ago, but he's asking if Miami will pursue a Miller Moss.
Possible. I don't know. I think we're still trying to see who enters. If you're looking at the player, I watched a ton of him at USC. Remember in high school, Miami recruited him in high school. True pocket passer. I think his mom's like a professor, smart academic type kid, plays that way on the field, good decision maker. Not that much different than Emory, quite frankly, but he's played and produced in the Big Ten and the Pac-12. So I think he's further along than Emory because of the production, but he's that type of player. Maybe a tinge more athletic, but really a true old school drop back passer, which I think can work with the offensive line you have and some of the weapons you'll have. So I think he's a high floor option. If I'm picking, the dual threat ability to create with the legs is something that I'm keeping an eye on with some of these candidates. So he's not going to help you so much there, but can he plug into this offense and win games in the ACC? I think so. And I think there's a lot of guys that if you plug them into this offensive line with this running game, you get back Jordan Lyle, you get back Mark Fletcher, you added Gerard Pringle, you got other guys, you got Lofton, you got Riley Williams, and then, of course, some of these young receivers. I think a lot of guys can plug into this offense and win games in the ACC. Miller Moss, I'd put in that category.
Rich Andrews says, why do we have no faith in anyone we have on our team that we recruited? I mean, look, I think we just kind of talked about that. I would expect for them to get guys who have more than 1 year of eligibility, unless it's a guy who's an absolute like plug and play starter and legit star. But I think in this year in particular, they thought they had the best quarterback in the country in Cam Ward, which wasn't far off, right? So they probably picked up more guys who had played a lot of football in hopes that it could accelerate the process. And again, you're a game away here from fulfilling that and still could. But at the end of the day, I think that was probably a little bit more behind the thinking process there.
Yeah, there was very much a win now mode with Cam Ward. You knew you only had him for 1 year. Every decision this offseason, once you got Cam Ward, was built around Cam Ward. Particularly some of the defensive line acquisitions that they really wanted to get experienced guys there. Everything was, let's win it with Cam Ward, which again makes this loss to Syracuse so deflating. But to me, going forward, you've signed a lot of highly rated top 100 players. They got to play. I think there is faith in them. There was just that trepidation of, are they going to learn on the job and make mistakes while we're trying to win it with Cam Ward? Maybe cost Cam Ward a game, right? He doesn't have games to give away. Now they've gotten some experience. Hopefully in this bowl game, if Miami doesn't make the playoff, they'll get significantly more experience. And then going into the season, you rely on them to be consistent players like Isaiah Horton was, like some of these offensive linemen were, where they developed and you put them in and they were able to do the job quite effectively. Mark Fletcher, guys that you signed and developed and were able to produce. Riley Williams, the guy I'm watching closely next year. I think he can be a really effective player. Elijah Lofton. I really think the offense is going to be pretty good unless the quarterback's just a complete disaster. But I think it's a very quarterback-friendly situation on offense. The key is going to be defensively. That great defensive line class you signed last year, the best defensive line class in the country, a class they were really, really happy about when they saw them on campus. Got to get those guys producing on the field in the ACC. And you got to find second-level defenders with speed and physicality and instincts that could play sideline to sideline and set a tone for you. Some of which, by the way, might be already on the roster. Cam Pruitt, Dylan Day, guys like that. So Popo, you have some of those guys on the roster that maybe can give you more than what you've seen so far early in their careers.
Anthony Manzano said he sent us a question on Twitter. Let me try to find it. He's asking about Connor Wegman.
Yeah, I don't see that one. I don't see that one. To me, if you're getting sort of this highly rated SEC, old Southwestern Conference, it's weird calling Texas A&M and Oklahoma SEC teams still. But if you're going for that kind of guy, I would look more towards, this is just my personal opinion, a Jackson Arnold, because Jackson Arnold's got really, really good mobility. He's got good intangible qualities. He's done a nice job, not a spectacular job, but he's had a tough hand there at Oklahoma. They have the worst offensive line in the country, or one of the worst offensive lines in the country. All of their receivers have been injured, and he's finding a way to win games and be competitive, obviously beat Alabama. He's got a lot of athleticism, which I like. Kind of reminds me of Bo Nix. I'm not saying he's going to be as successful as Bo Nix was, but Bo Nix was not in a great position coming out of Auburn. Goes to an offensive line in Oregon that allowed him to really relax and play free. He had good receivers there as well, and then you saw the results. He became one of the best quarterbacks in the country now, one of the front runners for Rookie of the Year in the NFL. We'll see him here tonight on Monday Night Football. But Jackson Arnold, I think, fits that particular mold. Now, is Jackson Arnold enough of a sure thing that you say, hey, here are the keys to this program? I don't know. But if you're talking about Wegman or guys like that, I lean personally more towards Arnold because of the athleticism.
Rich Andrews asking, why can we not recruit 5-star quarterbacks? You've been through the kind of the reason why. It's not the most efficient thing to do that. But if you want to kind of give your quick synopsis.
Well, look, so the first year, let's say the first full cycle, right? You got Jaden Rashada, who was a top-ranked quarterback, and that became a whole debacle with the Gators, and they lied to him about the money, and you lost him that way. There's a lot of things wrong with that. I think we kind of dodged a bullet just as far as, not the player necessarily, but the price tag for a young quarterback like that. Georgia, to me, made the smarter buy because they got him after he was already a little faded, and he's going to be able to sit and develop and now compete next year for a starting job once Carson Beck leaves. I think Georgia's the one that came out the best in that scenario. But you were able to get him signed or committed. If it wasn't for some weird stuff with the Gators making up monopoly money and trying to entice him away under false pretenses they're not getting sued for, you'd have Jaden Rashada in that first class. 24, you didn't have a Rashada. Obviously, you go with Judd Anderson. Should you've gone CJ Bailey there? That's a question we'll have to talk about over the next few months, maybe the next few years. But the biggest recruit quarterback-wise in the class of 24 was this guy named Cam Ward, and he's a 6-star. So, I think that's been the story with Miami's quarterback recruiting. My view of the situation, I've talked about it a ton on the podcast, is I would lean more towards portal. You look at the NFL, you look at the top 10 teams. I think most of those teams are going to have portal quarterbacks, guys that have been to multiple schools. So you could either get a guy like Cam Ward that's from a smaller school that wants to elevate. John Mateer would fit into that category as well. So you get him, someone like him, or you could get the faded 5-star, a Jackson Arnold, guys like that, then become better off at the next stop with a better system. That's your Jaden Daniels, your Bo Nix. They fit into that category. Dante Moore at Oregon was one of those guys last year. Jaden Rashad at Georgia. So there's different ways you can use the portal to elevate your position, but I like it better because you could see the players in college before you bring them into your building and pay them money. Whereas the high school guys, you're paying them a ton of money and you haven't really seen them. So you're still got to recruit high school guys. Luke Nickel, we'll talk about a bunch here on signing day. I think he's going to be a really, really good player. Judd Anderson has some tools, but to me, the portal is really the way to go. By the way, we should talk about signing day. We are going to be on all day. We'll give you the exact times. Maybe we'll tweet it out later today. It's going to be a full work day with a marathon.
I think we're trying to figure out what time the announcements
the first announcements are
going. We're kind of lining up like that. But I mean, I would say at the latest 8:00, we'll be on here probably before that. But I have a lot of cool stuff lined up lined up for that day, man.
It'll be a full work day here. We'll be live for hours, giving you the absolute latest on recruiting and everything else that comes through the door. And really fired up. Pete did it last year. It was one of the best things he ever did. And now he's got help because I'll be there as well. Mike Ryan will bomb in here and do a couple things as well. So excited. We'll have some guests on. So really excited for that program and some of the things we'll be doing there. Hopefully we get some momentum building to then. Like I said, once I get the info, I'll drop the bank. Right now, it's just I'm hearing the same things you're hearing, which is Nick's trending away. We're fighting. Stubbs trending strongly away. And you're really trying to protect your class, protect the Josh Moores of the world, and then add a guy like a Dallas Wilson, a DJ Pickett, a Ben Hanks, a big ticket item that's going to get people excited and potentially make an impact. Because it's one thing to get 4 stars, but getting an impact guy that really changes your fortune, that's what it's all about. Not trying to move the goalpost, because if you don't finish in the top 10, it's a huge disappointment. If you don't finish in the top 5, it's a disappointment. So that's the reality of the situation. I think anyone that tells you otherwise is lying, but you're still in the game for some big time players. Let's see if this is where he thrives. Let's see if he can bring 1 or 2 of these guys in the boat that can make an impact. And then now you're portal hunting to add impact players to what's hopefully a sustained program that is competitive year in and year out, like they were this year. This year's the beginning of something, then you're feeling okay about everything that transpired. If this year is like 2017, it's just a flash in the pan, it'll be nostalgic. You'll remember the Cam Ward celebration and some things like that, like the turnover chain, but it won't have the staying power. Hopefully it is not that, and it is something sustainable, which if you want to talk about something that's sustainable and built to last, the Miami Hurricane team store, use promo code INSIGHT20. You can do this in the store or online. You get 20% off your first item. That is at MiamiHTS.com. If you are going in person, it is right there on US 1, next to the Thesis Hotel, across the street from the University of Miami. Say what's up to Harry Rothwell, the king of Miami Hurricanes apparel for years. My man Jeremy, all kinds of great people, great Canes fans in that facility. It's a lot of fun to be in there. If you are local, Inside 20 will get you 20% off. But MiamiHTS.com, you can also use promo code Inside 20 and shop from the comfort of your home. Do your Christmas shopping. Get everything you need for the winter, for this season, for next season, for baseball season, for basketball season, just for fun. MiamiHTS.com, promo code Insight20.
Before we wrap things up here, Canes for Life, thank you for your contribution and appreciate you tuning in today. He says, at work, just tuned in. If Rhett Lashley was our head coach this year, are we undefeated? I've seen this question a lot. It's a fair question because of what they've done this year at SMU. I think my one thing is that Miami's offense is the number 1 offense in the country. Lashley obviously is an offensive coach. Who does he have the same defensive coordinator with him as well? I mean, are we bringing the entire staff over there? Look, I think there's no doubt. If you ask probably any coach in the ACC if they'd swap their defensive talent for Miami's, like most would take Miami's defensive talent, right? Although we know that there are holes there, especially on the back end, that group was way more talented to have the results that they had this year on the field. So, I mean, it's a valid question, but my question is he fixing the defense?
Yeah, and Lashley's doing a great job. I mean,
yeah,
what can you say?
I've always been a fan of his. So
yeah, I thought when you talk about Manny's big year in 2020 with Derek King, I think really when you look at it, Lashley probably deserves more credit than Manny because the defense was not very good that year. I mean, that team was not that much different than ours in terms of shootouts consistently won by the quarterback, Derek King. So Lashley's a stud. It's hard to project people in different places. One thing I've seen with coaching movement is that it's just hard to predict, man. It's so hard to predict. A guy like Gus Malzahn is in the championship with Auburn, and now he can't even get it done at UCF. A guy like Scott Frost is undefeated with UCF. Then he goes to Nebraska and is one of the worst coaches in the country. Tom Herman, who looked like he was going to be the next superstar coach, he's getting fired from FAU. Lincoln Riley from Oklahoma goes to USC and is at the bottom of the Big Ten. These things are hard to predict. there's just a lot of variables, and to pluck one coach from one situation and another is hard to say. I'm not smart enough to do it, and I don't think a lot of people can figure out who's going to succeed where. It's a really, really tricky, hard to predict thing. But I do know that Rhett Lashlee's in SMU. I think he's a perfect fit there, and he's doing as well as you could possibly expect for a team in their first year in the ACC. And I'm going to be the biggest SMU fan on the planet on Saturday.
Johnny Lagoon says, let's see how he is next year without Brashard Smith.
Yeah, the recruiting will be interesting there because it's Dallas, Texas. They got money. It's an interesting place. If he can evaluate well, not even getting the top 5 classes, but if he can get guys like how Matt Rule did at Baylor, where you were getting these fast Texas guys. Texas Christian did this for many years as well, where you're finding NFL players that maybe aren't going to Texas or Texas A&M or Alabama, and you're bringing them in. You're finding speedy guys that may be a little bit raw. Maybe guys are just underrated for whatever reason, late bloomers. Bring them into SMU. And if you get like a TCU type talent base or a Baylor type talent base, you could really cause some damage because he has a scheme.
The one question we've been getting a lot here about Antoine Jackson, who was a guy who was committed to Miami a couple of years ago, coming out, went to ECU, then went to UCF. I don't believe he was starting at UCF. I mean, obviously Miami needs a lot of help at defensive back. Do you think they kicked the tires on him? My thing is, like, he's now been to 2 schools and not necessarily been the man at either of those places yet.
Yeah.
So does Miami, if they're going to, I think, like we said, they're going to be pretty selective in the portal.
Yeah, I think, like I said, rather than just adding guys, I think we need to add impact, difference-making players. And that player might cost 3 players. But get the impact guy and then develop some of your younger guys and see what they can give you. Obviously, you have Frederic, you have Damari Brown. Those are 2 young players to start. You have Deani Hill still. He was disappointing this year. Maybe, next year for what he takes another step, but you still have him as experienced depth. You have young guys like even a Ryan Mack has not played a lot. Robbie Washington just moved positions. Maybe he can give you something. I know he's shown flashes in practice. So to me, if I don't want to stack my roster with guys that are okay, I want to aim for impact. Either getting a proven impact guy that's going to cost you a lot of money and cost you maybe the slots, or getting someone with just supreme talent that for whatever reason hasn't maximized it, like your Jalen Phillips. Guys like that have a ton of ability that if it hits, they're a first-round pick, and then maybe they're not, for whatever reason, not there yet. I wouldn't go for the guys that are just, pretty good players, not particularly fast or athletic. Now, that's my view of the world. Don't just fill spots. Let your young players fill spots. Add impact guys that change the identity of your team.
Well said. All right, D. Well, we're coming up on an hour here. Appreciate everyone who's been on the stream with us today. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel. Coming at you every day here. We got Mike Ryan on Wednesday. Tomorrow, probably do more recruiting talk. And then, of course, Wednesday, it's not just Mike Ryan. It's the all-day, pretty much marathon, where we're breaking down all the signees as they come in through fax. And, we'll bring you the live announcements. We'll see how many and Miami will be involved in on that day. But stay tuned. Keep it locked on Canes Insight.
Go Canes.
Go Canes.